Hello. Let's see what's happening. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. How's everybody doing? I am just getting started here, trying to make sure that I can see people's comments. So I'm going to have to open it up on another platform while I chat with you. Hey, it's Christiane Knight. How are you doing? This is it. This is the big party. This is launch day for In Sleep You Know. And I am currently looking for, evidently Facebook has made it so there's a little tiny picture of me and I can't see any of the chat. So I need to open it up into something else. So I'm chatting with you while I do that. Don't mind me while I get this started because, every time you get things set up with Facebook, they like to change things. It's really great. I'll tell you what, in the meantime, while I'm doing that, why don't I give you guys a poll? I don't know if anybody's here, but if there are, here we go. Here's a poll for y'all. Let's see if it'll work. Hello. Activate. Activate. There we go. Can I make this bigger? Does that doesn't help me any. All right. Dear Facebook, why do you have to be so stupid? Anyway, so this is the first time I have done a Facebook Live in a while, obviously. Usually I do it with my other business, which is fiber art. And I do a lot of like demos and things like that. And normally it works pretty well. But yeah, obviously not so much right here. Let's see if this will show comments. Sort of. So stupid. How about if we look in the event? Anyway, so my book launched today. The Kindle version has been already up for pre-order, and if you pre-ordered a Kindle version, it should already be in your Kindle. Somebody said, reading is for chumps, why am I here? I don't know, you tell me. Yeah, let's see. Anyway, so you should have your Kindle version in your library already. The paperback book is already live, so you can go purchase it now. And I encourage you, if you've been waiting on that, please do it. Please do it now. You can do it while we're talking. That would be super. I would love to get out of this video and go and see lots of people purchasing. There's the comments. Yes. Thank you, Facebook. Ding dong. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Brandon. You would think as many times as I've done this, it would be easier, but no, it's not. They're always changing something on Facebook, always. So anyway, here we are, and I have for you today a selection of a couple of poems, some reading from the novel, and I'm here to take questions and talk a little bit about the book and the background and anything else we can think of to chat about. First of all, before I get started, I want to give a big shout out to Lisa Ellis, who's in the chat. I could not have made this book without her. It's my words, but she did all the really hard stuff, like making sure it was formatted properly and cheering me on. And all the things that really mattered. She kept me organized. And you too, if you are thinking about writing a book, you too could get her services. I will put, and when I'm all done, I'll put a link to her business in the chat so people can get it. She's awesome. Thanks, Lisa. You're the best. Hi, Liz. Hi. My friends are all here. So anyway, I know most of you who are here right now kind of know what the book is about, but thanks, Lisa. Yay. But I figured, I'll talk about it a little bit because there will be people watching after this is over, right? And maybe some of you haven't really, you're just excited about the book, but you haven't really looked into what it's about too much. So I'll talk about that a little bit. I have stuff prepared because I'm a prepared person. I have all the electronics here. I have, check it. How you like that? My tablet. I have my phone. I have my laptop. I have everything. Okay. So let's see. It would have been nice if it had kept this open, but. All right, so first of all, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat. I have it right here now in front of me, so if you answer, I will be able to see it. I had some people ask me some questions a couple of weeks ago. I asked, anybody had questions for me as a writer, and I will talk about some of the answers to those things also as we go along. But I figured just to get things warmed up, I'll read for you first the blurb from the back of the book. And the blurb is, even the grittiest blue-collar city has a spark of magic under the surface. But in Baltimore, graffiti holds secret messages and artists are the spellcasters. Abandoned buildings hide ancient beings, and at the local club, you might find yourself rubbing shoulders with menacing and otherworldly creatures. If you know how to look, of course. Merrick Moore is just a regular guy with dreams of making it big with his garage band, but not much else, until he crashes a party thrown by reclusive eccentrics. When the mortal enemies of his new friends show up to his band's first gig, Merrick finds himself trying to prevent the start of a war that will have consequences for everyone, Fae and human alike. So, the Fae court that he gets involved with is the Eleriannan. You might be more familiar with them as the term Seelie, kind of, the good Fae, the good fairies, although my Fae don't like to be called fairies. It's kind of diminutive. They don't like that sort of term and they feel like it makes them look small, and they do not like feeling like they are small. They have some really particular thoughts about what is acceptable to call them. Their foes are the Eleriannan, and we might call them the Unseelie. To them, to the Eleriannan, the Eleriannan are misguided, often malevolent, and backwards in their thinking. Everything's falling down behind me. The Eleriannan have a problem. They're becoming disconnected with the world around them, preferring to withdraw from the city to the countryside, hiding in their big House Mirabilis, instead of using their powers to influence and inspire mortals to greater creativity and imagination. In doing that, they've left a power void in the city that is being filled in by Fae with their own agenda and ideas about how the city should serve them, rather than the opposite. So when Merrick decides to crash this party on Samhain, he stumbles into something so much bigger than he expected. They convince him to take on a 7-year bond with them, with the promises to inspire him and enhance his creativity. And that appeals to him and his dreams of being a successful musician. But there's so much more he ends up with. A girlfriend who can move through the dreamland and visit him there, and friends with shape-shifting powers, magical gifts that he doesn't understand yet, and an impending war with the Eleriannan. So the story has mortals, Fae and half-blood Fae, and they're also beings like the creepy Ardoneth. They're creatures that Merrick calls stickmen, because they look like they're made from sticks and mud. Or the Finn, who are tree-like and move gracefully and love to dance, and only communicate telepathically, sharing their feelings and impressions. I've been asked before where I get the inspiration for some of the creatures that aren't necessarily what you associate with the normal fairy kind of creatures. And honestly, it's just stuff that, it's creatures that just pop up into my mind. And to me, trees have always had that kind of, that personality. Some are good, some are maybe not so friendly towards humans. I mean, think of like the Whomping Willow in Harry Potter. Some of them, especially the willows, you have to watch the willows. There are other creatures as well. I don't want to give away too much, but you'll be able to meet some very fantastical people. And I'm excited for that. I'm excited for you to meet them. Let's see. Anybody have any questions yet? Thanks, Lisa. Lisa thinks that it's incredible. I had a very good time writing it. Um, my my goal was first. I mean, when I write a book, when I write any kind of story, the characters come first. You know, somebody will show up in my mind and they have a story to tell me, and then other people come along and just sort of introduce themselves. But I have had this Fae story brewing in my mind for about 20 years. Like, I have a whole arc. There'll be definitely be more books in this with some other characters who are also interesting that will meet up with Merrick and his pals. Um, but it's I plan things, but things also write themselves in some ways. The characters come first, and then the story starts to unfold itself, and then suddenly the story will take itself to places that I may not have expected it to go. That definitely happened with In Sleep You Know. There were some aspects of it that I was extremely surprised by when it happened, and I had no plans, no plans for those things to happen, which is really cool. But it also kind of makes you wonder, where does this come from, right? Um, I have a fertile imagination, but some of this is just like, it feels like it's almost outside of me. It's really cool. Um, the Eleriannan in particular, when I started writing, I didn't really have any idea of who they were going to be other than malevolent in appearance. And things didn't kind of work out the way I wanted it to with that. They had their own ideas, and they definitely introduced themselves. I had no plans as to who they were going to be. So I hope that you enjoy, when you read the book, you enjoy how they introduce themselves and what goes on with that. Another thing about the book that is maybe different from some of the books you've read is I'm heavily musically influenced. And when I write, I listen to music. And those two things play off of each other. You know, music will influence my writing, and then writing will influence me to pick up certain kinds of music to add to that mood. And that's where the whole idea of the soundtrack came from. I mean, this book is immersed in music, and Merrick's in a band with Lucy and Sousa. You know, they have a band, they perform in the book, they have songs in the book. But there's also music that Eleriannan love music, and they happen to prefer kind of a darker sort of goth thing when when music shows up in their homes. Yes, that's because that's what I like, but it's also, it fits them very much. The characters talk about music a lot, so it made sense to me to have a soundtrack for this, because so much of the music that I listened to influenced each scene, and it all went together. So when you look through the book, each chapter is a song from that soundtrack. And when you listen to the song, hopefully you'll be able to hear what it was about that song that made me think that those two things went together. It's definitely mood setters, especially some of them, like Sousa. when Sousa goes off and has a chapter to himself, his song is very much Sousa. The song and him are inseparable. The whole thing. When he meets a character named Valley, who's also a punk girl. It's perfect. And the song is What We All Want by Gang of Four. When I listen to it now, if it just pops up in my music, I think of Sousa. You know, that's how that works. But you can get the soundtrack and listen to the soundtrack while you're reading. It is available on Spotify, and the playlist is in the book, but it's also on my website. So if you scroll down all the way to the bottom on the blog page, it won't be on the very front page, because right now that is specifically about pushing the book. But if you go to the blog or any other page, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's a bar. And in the bar you can play the soundtrack right from there, or you can open it on Spotify and listen to it while you read the book. It really will add to that whole atmosphere. Some of the music that's in there you may not be familiar with, because I made a mix of bands that have a bigger name and are a little more classic goth, industrial, dark music. But then there are also some smaller bands, lesser known bands that are in there that are in my personal soundtrack that I think you will enjoy listening to if you're not familiar with them already. One of the things I do besides write and make yarn is I used to be a DJ in clubs and on the radio, and I actually have my own streaming radio station now. So music is a thing that I am always pushing, because it inspires creativity. It is tied to moments. It's tied to emotions. So those things go together very strongly to me. And I am hoping for the next book, which I am writing a sequel, the next book will have even more of these lesser known bands in there that maybe will be an exciting adventure for my readers to experience if they're not familiar with them already. Let's see. I have questions that I haven't answered that people asked me, and some that I answered already, but I will answer them again. My friend Jess had asked, do I do anything special to set the mood to write? Like have a special mug, or candles, or music? And I talked about the music already, but what I had to say was, let's just say that I have a preferred setting and a realistic setting. In the preferred setting, I've got candles going and music playing that suits the mood of what I'm writing, and a nice mug of tea, plus some water and standby. Or maybe I'm at a coffee shop with most of those requirements already met. Obviously, I haven't been able to do that recently. The reality, however, has been me squeezing in moments of writing as I can. So often about 30 minutes after breakfast, an hour in the afternoon, maybe another hour or two before bed. I need times when I'm not going to be interrupted constantly, and being mostly homebound right now, obviously, makes those times a little more rare than I'd like. The hour or so before I go to sleep is really my golden time for writing if I'm not too tired. Often, even if I'm not actively trying, I'm assembling series in my mind and scenes in my mind, and they'll get fleshed out in writing later on. Honestly, when writing scenes, I find that the best time for problem-solving scenes or point plots is when I'm in the shower. I've worked through some great moments in there. Often I let the characters work through dialogue or personality traits while I'm getting clean. I don't know why it works, but it does. And some of the most dramatic points of In Sleep, came to me while I was washing my hair. In fact, actually, talking to characters happens the most often when I'm in the shower. They are invasive little guys. Let me tell you, they just bust in and start telling me things. And I'll have whole scenes written out with dialogue. And then once I'm done, I go and I have to type it all down. But it's a really great way for me to work through how that scene is going to work without having to write it out and then go back and edit it, which is great because I'll run it a couple of different times in a couple of different ways until it sounds just perfect. I'm working on a scene right now for the next book that is tricky because it involves a character that is not likable. And the scene makes him more likable, and it's a very hard balance to write a despicable character in a flattering light. So there's been a lot of mulling it, how it's happening. Let's see. I think there might have been some. Karen says writing in the shower helps with writing for her as well. Yeah, it really does. There's something about that focus. Like my mind isn't on what I'm doing. I'm just thinking about the actual showering part. You do that automatically. So my mind is very open and free to just kind of work on these things, the characters, the setting, but most usually it's dialogue, character points, like traits, things like that. Oh, thank you so much, Caitlin, for putting up the playlist. I really, really appreciate that. Let's see. Another question. Well, Christopher asked, do I read any books when I'm writing? And that's a really good question because I have to be careful. When I'm reading fiction, and I'm actively writing a book, I don't want to get influenced by what I'm reading, right? It's way too easy to do. And the hope is when you go back to edit it, you're like, oh, okay, I know where that scene came from. Because, you think, oh, no, I'm going to be really careful, but it sneaks in. You don't mean for it to, but influences sneak in. And it's okay to have influences. That's fine. There's a difference between having an influence and ripping something off, right? I have some scenes that are absolutely influenced by things that I've read, but I took them and made them my own because I don't want to regurgitate what somebody else has written, obviously. If I think it's going to be too influential, I will wait to read it until after I'm done writing and maybe I'm in the editing phase. I had to do that with a couple of books while I was writing in sleep, because I knew that they might taint what I was writing or how I was reading it. I do read a ton of nonfiction while I'm working, especially research. Oh, I do so much research. When I was writing Valley, for example, I spent a ridiculous amount of time researching street art. I know a lot already, but there were just some cultural things I wanted to learn more about, and like language. Really important to nail the language on it. You don't want to write something and then have somebody point you out and be like, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. And I also wanted to make sure that I saw lots of art to influence me, and then I would just kind of fall down the rabbit hole of looking at art because there's so much out there. It's great. On my Instagram, I should actually regram some of the things that I see on Instagram. I follow a lot of street artists, and there's some fantastic stuff out there, and they influenced me a lot when I was talking about Valley and how she throws up a piece. It's Baltimore has a lot of street art, which is really cool. Is one of the things that made me think to make one of the characters a street artist. Also, I was really fascinated with the idea of street art and magic being intertwined because they're both very purposeful things. Art and magic go together really strongly. It's concentrating your intent and effort on something that becomes visual for other people, and you're manifesting something. So, you're manifesting art. Why wouldn't you manifest an intention and create magic that way, right? Makes sense. Anyway, so I did a lot of research. There are, it's really great. Like, you come up with things like some of the other stuff that I had to research. I had to research some of the fairy lore that I knew because I wanted to make sure that I got it right. Em says the first thing she noticed about Baltimore was the street art. It's true, right? We have fantastic street art here. How could I not include it? But yeah, okay, so there was Gaelic language. I had to do a lot of research about that to nail things right. And Welsh, too, because I use both. And some of it I take and I morph a little bit to make it unique for the characters because they speak, the words that they use, they don't speak a language in the book, but they use words from their language that are kind of influenced those languages. We don't know. Also, Latin, I had to do a little Latin research. I like Latin. I know a little Latin, but I've never taken Latin, so, I had to do fairy tale research, fairy lore research, because it's really important to know something before you change it. If you're going to take it and adapt it to your own uses, you should know the background and the history of it really well before you do so. Super important, don't change it until you understand it. Buildings, man, I had to. So one of the buildings, the Maith, is a big deal building in this, and it is based on an actual building in Baltimore, and it is now a hotel. It's called the Brexton, and back when I was familiar with it, hold on a second, Karen, I'll answer you that. When I first became familiar with the Brexton, I knew it as a building that was run down. It was kind of abandoned. There were people living in it. That's how I got into it. And I know intimately what part of the inside of it looked like before it was renovated and turned into a hotel, because there were people living there like flophouse style. It's this beautiful big brick building, and I will put in the chat there. It is called Hotel Brexton if you want to see what it looks like now. Um, and to have that, I had to like really go and do some research on what the inside layout was like, because again, if you're going to change something, you need to understand it first. And I completely changed part of the inside of it, and so I needed to know how the layout worked. Oh, thank you, Stacy, for posting up that link. Yeah, I have. You can get the book through Amazon, or there are some. If you want the ebook, there are a couple of other places that are listed on there. If you don't want to go through Amazon, so you have options. But anyway, yeah. So that was fun. I went down a huge rabbit hole looking up the Brexton. I found photos of what it looked like when I used to go there, and it was kind of trashy. And now what it looks like is a hotel, and I kind of sort of want to go stay there, just to kind of get that feel, like what it's like now. It's a really cool building. If you make it into Baltimore, it's not far from the Lyric Opera House, that area. It's in Mount Vernon. So you should check it out if you ever come through Baltimore. Maybe look me up, and I could take you on a tour of places that are in the book, like the mention of Graffiti Alley, which is, they don't actually go to Graffiti Alley, but Valley talks about it, and it's really cool. It's basically an alley full of graffiti, but the graffiti is amazing, and it's sanctioned graffiti, so it's good. Like, there are huge pieces that go up all the time that are really complex. Hey, Robert's here! Yay! So that, that's a really cool place we could go check out. I could take you to the place where the Club Mercata is based off of, which is the Depot, which is a club I used to DJ at. And some of the things, the realities have been changed about it, but more or less it's the same kind of hole in the wall that it is in the book. And the Baltimore Fay Tour, hit me up, I'll do it. We can have a good time. There's a coffee shop that features prominently in the book, and there's not one that's actually based off of, but I could take you to a couple of places that sort of have that vibe. The Frisky Bean is definitely based off of some places that I've been, but it's kind of an amalgam of lots of coffee shops that I've been to that have that vibe. It's the kind of place that when you read the description, you're like, I've been there. I know that place. All right, well, sign up, Baltimore Fay Tour. I can take you. We can do this. Let's see. Just a reminder, if you have questions for me, please throw them in the comments and I will answer them. I'm answering some of the other questions that were given to me. And actually, this one is from Robert, and who gave this to me the other day. And he asked, do you outline or spitball as you write? And this is a really great question. Writers do very different things. Some writers have it all mapped out, like from beginning to end, the whole outline, summary, the characters, all of it. And I'm not quite there. I used to be a pantser, which is someone who writes by the seat of their pants. No plans. In fact, that's how this story started. It was totally a pants operation. I sat down and just started writing. Merrick just popped out and the whole party thing just happened. The first couple of chapters started out as pants chapters. Then I got serious about the book because I realized there was a lot going on and I really needed to get organized to make sure all of the different paths in the book came together and knit into a good story that was complex. So, needing a plan, I wrote a rough outline or a summary of the plot. And even though it wasn't written in stone, because lots of changes happened as things developed, I used a 3-act formula, kind of. And then I delved into tracking the growth of each character through those acts. There's several important characters who get their own story arcs, so I needed to be methodical to make sure they got all the resolutions that they deserved. Merrick, of course, was most important. And some of the things that happened to him were planned, and others came to me as I was writing, or he told me what was happening. There's an entire scene that happens at Tianan House that was completely changed as I was writing it, which I mentioned earlier. I had plans that were entirely thrown out by the characters. So I guess that makes me a plantster. Let's see, do you have any more questions? Thank you for that. Names for places. Some of them some of them they just come out, and then some of them were through some research, like House Mirabilis. That kind of it would just that was the house. Tannin House, I don't even know where that came from. That was another one that just popped into my head. The Maith is actually, there's a term for the Sidhe called Dini Maith, which is like it's sort of like the Fairfold, and so Maith House came from that. Some of the characters' names. This is actually a really good seg into talking about character names, because a lot of my character names mean things. They usually have a name that kind of will hint at what their character is like, if you look it up. It doesn't matter to most people reading it, but it matters to me. And it helps me kind of solidify what that character is going to be like. Merrick, that was his name from the beginning, Merrick Moore. That one popped into his head. Ashland is a classic name that came from a poet, and there's actually a whole style of poetry called Ashland poetry. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but that has to do with why she has the name that she has. Some of the other characters, they have names that kind of like Fallon, that is kind of a queenly name, so that's the name she got. There are, I'm trying to think, characters I don't want to give away too much about, so yeah, anyway, just read the book. And then we'll talk more once it's been out for a while, and I'll tell you some more, and feel free to ask about characters then, and I will give you some depth about why I picked the names that I did. Thanks for ordering, Karen. Thank you so much. Yay! If you got a signed book, they should be going out in about a week or so. I'm just waiting for them to get here, and then I have a cool little package that I'm putting together with the signed books. So expect some treasures. Let's see. Meredith asked, what are your favorite songs on your writing playlist? So this is a great question, because it goes back to the music thing. As I said, I match music to the scenes. I can speak, I really can. When you look at In Sleep, you'll see it right away. So every chapter has a song, and I collected all the songs, and I also collected songs that were mentioned in the story to the best of my ability. There were a couple of songs that were mentioned that weren't on Spotify, so I had to wing it with those. And I collected all those together and put them in a Spotify playlist. I'm actually thinking I might do another Spotify playlist that has kind of like off-the-record songs that are influenced by each character, because, I like making playlists, and it's fun. I talked about the song What We All Want by Gang of Four being Sousa's song. And then for Merrick, he's a Joy Division boy, 100%. Heart and Soul is like his song. The whole reason that the band is called The Drawback is because it is a song that was by Warsaw, who became Joy Division. And that I wanted to put that song into the Spotify playlist, but it wasn't there on Spotify. So picky, Spotify. Why don't you have the song I want? It's a great song. These days, I've also been listening to a lot of my streaming radio station, Radio Zion. There's a lot of music on there that really has that same kind of feel. Carrie asked, what inspires me as an author, and who are the authors that I like and admire? This is a really great question, because I get inspired by a lot of things. Of course, music and fairy background and tales and lore. I'm inspired by nature. I'm really inspired by people. A lot of what I write, although it is fae lore, it is stories about people and how they interact with each other and how they affect each other. This whole story is about relationships and about friendship and understanding each other. So there's a lot of that in there, because I am fascinated by people, and how they interact with each other and what we mean to each other. So that comes out in my stories. Some of the authors who inspire me, and I'm spitting, this is how excited I am about this. I have a nice list. I have Theodora Goss, Jane Yolen, Ursula Le Guin, Elizabeth Hand, who is fabulous, Charles DeLint, Margaret Atwood, Neil Gaiman, and Patricia McKillop. Right now, I'm also really loving Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe. I follow that on Webtoon, but when the graphic novel comes out, I am grabbing that. Let's see, any questions? Hey, Wendy! Hey! Oh yeah, more playlists, definitely. I will throw one together ASAP because I have tons of music that I also listen to with this that while writing that absolutely goes in the storyline. Let's see. Any more questions? Lizette wanted to know, how much research do you do and are you interested? And she was also interested in finding out more about publishing. Well, that's a whole thing right there. Research, I talked about that. I do tons of research because there's nothing worse than writing something and not doing your research, not doing the due diligence to find out, and then having somebody read it and go, that ain't right. And sometimes you can say, well, this is artistic interpretation, but sometimes it's just not right. So you have to know enough. As I said earlier, you have to know enough to build on that and make it your own. It's really important. Research is key. And it's little stuff as well as big stuff. I researched everything from putting together the way a character spoke properly, because some of my characters speak a little more archaically and some of them speak very modern style. And getting that syntax just right requires sometimes some, one of the things I had to research was, would a character use this word? How modern is a word that I wanted to use? And that required a lot of changing around, because sometimes a word just isn't as old as you think it is, or a phrase, or a way of using a phrase. English is not a static language, it changes. So whereas the characters might have picked it up in time, some of them absolutely did not. Some of them they're still speaking like they spoke 200 years ago, kind of, And some of them are like old as dirt and speak just like, I do with like my kind of slang. So publishing process is a whole nother thing. There's a lot to it. One thing I will tell you is, no matter how many edits you think you need more. I can't tell you how many times I reread this story. I could probably read it backwards, out loud to you backwards in my sleep, because I have reread it so many times. And yet it's funny, because as many times as I've reread it, I still go back and make references. Even while I was writing, I had to re-reference myself a lot, because you want to make sure you don't screw up anything as far as continuity. But also now, as I'm starting to write a sequel, I have to go back and reference things to make sure that I get details correct. And of course, when you mess up details, those are the things you pick up in editing as well. Oh, really? Robert just said Webster's has a word added by year function. That is really helpful. I could have used that while I was writing this book. I'm definitely going to use it the next time for this next one. Yeah, it's just one of those things where you think you're done editing. You're not. And then you'll have somebody come in and do a read through just to get a feel for it, and then they're going to have suggestions for you. So plan for, if you decide that you want to write and publish something, plan for a much longer time between what you think is a finished manuscript and what is actually a finished manuscript. Because it will save you a lot of heartache to know that you are definitely not finished. And when you think you're finished, you're not finished. And then when you really think you're finished, you might not be finished. It's okay. It's going to take a while. Perfection, or as close as we mere humans can get to that, takes time. As far as other aspects of publication, I'm not really sure what to tell you. I guess that would be a whole other video that I could totally do at another time, because there's so much to it. Get somebody to help you. Get lots of people to help you if you can. But I was talking earlier about Lisa, who's in the chat. She was she's my book angel. She helped me with all the things I didn't know and all the things I didn't know that I didn't know. You want somebody who will get you a good copy editor, who will look over everything and make sure that it reads properly. You want to make sure that it is formatted properly. You need multiple formats, depending on how you're releasing it. You need somebody who will make sure that you've got a great cover, that the book looks right when you open it. You want to make sure, like, this is my proof copy, so it's got a big bar on it. But when you open it, you want to make sure that the print looks good, that the headers look good. There's a whole feel to having a book. When you pick it up, when a book feels right. When you open it and you start reading it, when it looks right to you, but you don't always know why that's the case. You need an expert to help you with that. Definitely worth every penny. Lisa says, graphic novel? Graphic novel would be really fun. More work, definitely. But I love that whole aspect of visual art with words like that. Graphic novels are so cool. Let's see, do I have any other questions? Katie asks, do I prefer ink and paper, laptop, typewriter, smart device? I like ink and paper and a laptop. I used to write on a typewriter. I don't own one anymore. It's okay. It's a little clicky-clacky. The older you get, the harder it gets on your fingers. But I would say 90% of my writing is done on the laptop now. And then probably the other 10% is broken up between writing it on paper and then transferring it over to the laptop, or speaking it out loud into a device and then transferring it over to the laptop. One of the things I have found is actually having a sound recorder to grab those little thoughts is super duper important, because shower thoughts, when you're writing that shower scene, or when you're driving in the car and your mind just sort of starts to wander and comes up with an idea, being able to jot that down without having to write it is really helpful. But I find like writing on the laptop is just really smooth. I use a program called Scrivener. I had been using something else and had a lot of hassle with it. It actually made it a lot harder for me as I was starting to compile together my final drafts and things, because don't get a program that you have to fight. Get a program that does what you want it to do right at the beginning and just does it right. And Scrivener was that for me. It made life a lot easier for me, and I really wish that I had just had it from the very beginning. I actually started on Google Docs, using that like a Word program, and that was okay, but it doesn't format really easily. And it's clunky. With Scrivener, you can break things up into scenes with little cards, and you can flip back and forth, and you can take them and drop them and move them around really easily. It's really cool. You do have to pay for it, but it's worth it if you're serious about writing. And I mean, even if you're not serious about writing, even if it's just a hobby, it's really worth it to make it easy for you, right? And to keep it organized. Let's see. Robert wants to know print size for readability. What size? Lisa, do you remember the answer to that? Because right off the top of my head, I don't remember. I don't have my notes from when we listed everything as far as like print size and all that. So I don't know right off the top of my head. I definitely like it more readable, because as I get older, it's harder for me to see. I wear progressives because I'm old, and I find that reading a lot of times, if the print is too small, I have to take my glasses off to be able to read it. So I want something that I'm comfortable with. I'll be reading from this later. And thank you, Lisa. She says 10.5 to 11 points. I read out loud from this in a previous interview, and I found it was very easy for me to read from aloud without too much having to like squint or like figure out things. So this is definitely a good size print. It was really easy to read aloud from. Sometimes you get books and it's like squinty squint. And not only is it hard, like you can't read aloud from it because, well, at least I can't, because I'm sitting there scrambling, trying to make sure I understand what each word is as I'm going, but it'll give me a headache. I mean, I don't want it super wide. I'm not at that point yet, but readability is a thing for sure. You want it to be comfortable when you pick it up. Let's see. Oh, I kind of answered this. She wanted to know, do I write in chronological order or skip scene to scene? I mostly write in chronological order. Sometimes I'll have scenes, like in this book, the scenes with where Susan meets Valley, those were written ahead of time, and then they were dropped in. That was actually going to be a totally different story, and then it all just kind of came together. But for the most part, I would say I'm fairly chronological, in part because there's a lot going on in the story, and if I start writing scene by, like scene here and a scene there, it can be hard to dovetail it all in properly and make it mesh. But this is the book that I'm working on now, the sequel. I've already got a couple of different scenes in different places. And then it's my responsibility as a writer to make sure they all come together and work and to make a solid story. Let me tell you, it's really fun when you have a bunch of different characters that you're tracing and their arcs and trying to weave it all together so that everybody gets that ending that they deserve. It is interesting. It's like a puzzle where you have to keep track of different threads, or like a game where you're trying to watch a bunch of different things and you're trying to make them all converge. Luckily, I like that kind of thing. It's a good challenge, and it's really satisfying. But when I wrote the end of this story, I was so satisfied. Yes, I did it. It was like solving a puzzle, but it was also satisfying because everybody got what they deserved. Let's see. She also wants to know, have you tried the method of writing straight through before fixing typos and scenes and errors? And do I have a writing schedule? I talked about writing schedule earlier. I squeeze it in where I can mostly. As far as writing straight through, I do that to some degree, but then a lot of times if I get stuck, this has helped me a lot. So this may be something, if you're an aspiring writer, that may be a tip that helps you. When I get stuck and I don't know where to go with the story, I will go back and start reading through and kind of lightly editing things, because it puts me back into the story, and it also helps me catch inconsistencies, which for some reason just kicks in that whole, like, okay, now that I've got this inconsistency fixed, or I've got this little talking point fixed, what else is happening ahead? And it just kicks me in. So sort of, I will write until I get stuck. With this story, there were a couple of places that I got stuck and had to think a bit about what was going to happen and how it was going to work. And so I would go and pick at things in the back. I also, one of the things I did was I had a professional editor read through my first couple of chapters and give me some points. And then also a friend did the same thing with the story later on and give me some points about things that I might want to look at or fix. And that helped as well. So, a little of this, a little of that. Let me drink a little water. I'm starting to get froggy here from all the talking. Robert wants to know, chapter endings, leaving white space, yes or no? Yeah, I've got white space. Perfect example. It's okay. It defines the breaks in chapters. Looks good to me. I kind of like that feeling. To me, that gives me that signal that if I want to stop here, I can take a pause before I jump back into the story. One of the things I like to do when I start another chapter is I like to start a chapter with something happening. It doesn't have to be momentous, but I like it to be like you jump right back into some part of the story, not descriptive or, it's just a style that I have. Let's see, any other questions? No. Okay. Anybody else? Any questions? Questions? Do you want me to read something? I'd be happy to read. Last time that I read from the book was on the Faye Productions interview that happened last week, which if you didn't catch is linked. I linked that on my website, christianneknight.com, and it's also on YouTube under Faye Productions. And I read from chapter 2. I don't like going too far into the book because there's so many little reveals in it that I don't want to ruin. So I decided that I would read chapter 1, and that will introduce everybody. If you haven't gotten a copy of it yet, it will get you into it and kind of introduce some of the characters. So how does that sound? And hopefully I won't be too froggy, because my voice is definitely... It's allergy season here, and I am highly allergic. And so about 30 minutes into talking nonstop, I can feel it in here. I had some cough drops before I came on because I was preparing ahead of time, as you do. Right now, my car, which is normally green, is yellow-green. Oh, it's terrible. I can't even be outside right now because I'll be a mess, a polleny mess. All right, so I am going to read to you from chapter 1 of In Sleep You Know. And this chapter is called, it has the music header of Dead Can Dance's song Mesmerism. So if you are familiar, you can kind of set the scene in your mind. Merrick took a deep breath before stalking boldly into a Halloween party. He had heard a lot about the people who lived in the big Victorian house on the outskirts of town. Their parties carried the sort of legends that were fueled completely by rumor. No one he actually knew had been to one of them, but his friends all had stories, handed down until the teller couldn't positively identify the protagonist of the tale. Well, he would be the first of his friends to make it in, and he intended to make it count. He'd managed to beg a ride to the edge of town and hiked his way to the place on dark back roads with barely enough room for 2 cars, much less a pedestrian. He figured that he had earned his chance to see what had happened in the big house by virtue of making it there without getting squashed by an SUV. No one really seemed to notice that he didn't belong with anyone there. He decided to wear an outfit that could go many places without too much comment. Black BDUs tucked into freshly polished combat boots, topped off with an untucked white button-up shirt. A loosely tied black tie with skeletons dancing across it added an irreverent air that matched his spiky black hair perfectly. He looked every bit the musician that he aspired to be, without overstating it, as he carefully planned. Merrick scanned around quickly to get his wits about him and headed for the likely place where the kitchen would be. He had brought 2 6-packs of the best beer he could afford, a rich porter from a local microbrewery that he had discovered one night while in a bar in Fells Point. He had fallen in love with the taste and brought it whenever he could find it and could afford it. The way he saw it, he was crashing the party. The least he could do was bring the beer he loved as a peace offering. Maybe the occupants of the house would notice his superior taste and tolerate him. Or maybe they would just kick him out and keep his beer. It was a difficult call at this point, really. The people he'd seen so far were all rather eccentric looking. They all seemed to be much more attractive than any one house full of people had a right to be, although none of them could be said to have a traditional beauty about them. From what Merrick had seen so far, they tended to be dramatic in dress, although that could have been attributed to the holiday, of course. He found the kitchen, and he decided to take a beer for himself and anonymously stash the rest in the fridge. He should find someone to introduce himself to, he supposed, although he wasn't sure how he would answer the inevitable questions about why he was at the party in the first place. In fact, he wasn't really sure what had drawn him here. A sense of adventure, perhaps, mixed with an insatiable curiosity. The refrigerator was full of strange food, odd fruit, weirdly lumpy packages with mysterious contents, and many dark bottles of liquid, corked and sealed with wax. There was a variety of beers on the top shelf, and he added the porters to that collection. Closing the door to the fridge, he was surprised by a small figure standing on the other side and took a step back with a gasp. The girl also shared his shock for a moment before bursting into laughter. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Never fear, stranger. I won't spirit you away. Yet." She opened her eyes wide and smiled innocently. Merrick gave in and started laughing too. She looked at him carefully and said, "You're new here. Did you find us on your own? Merrick admitted, I have been hearing the legends about these parties for ages and decided I would like to see them firsthand. I apologize if I overstepped my bounds, but I came a long way to be here tonight. I felt like I was drawn here. Why did he just say that? Damn, it was like his tongue had a mind of its own. We like honest people here. We also have no call to argue with a call to join us. In fact, your tenacity honors us. And you brought beverages as well, yes? Merrick nodded mutely. She smiled and said, Good! You even follow the ancient formula of party crashing. Well, we didn't call it party crashing back then, but it will do for now. She paused to give Merrick a glowing smile and winked at him. He was utterly enraptured at this point. He had never met a woman that had managed to captivate him so quickly. He could listen to her speak all night, never grow tired, he decided. You have to understand a few things before you enter the fray, as they say. Please let me be your guide, as you've made a favorable impression on me, and I feel that I should get you through this evening unscathed. Do you agree? Merrick nodded, intrigued. Nay, you must say aloud what you intend, she declared. Merrick blinked at that, but complied. I gladly accept you as guide. She beamed at his wording and exclaimed, Perfect! You did that quite well. Choose your words that carefully when dealing with us, and you will go far. Now for the next question. Will you tell me your name? And be careful here when you are asked for it tonight from others than myself, because names hold power. Never reveal all until you are sure. Do you understand? I will give you mine first, as a token of good faith, but know this. There is a secret to the name that you carry. You should never give it away until you are sure. Give your common name or a nickname when you are asked, and then only if you wish. Names given are gifts. She caught his gaze and held it, peering into his eyes until he thought he might either have to kiss her or run screaming. She broke the tension finally with a sweet smile and said happily, I can see that this night will yield many surprises. I am Ashland, and I am quite glad that I found you in our kitchen tonight. Merrick felt quite suddenly as if he had been given a great honor. What was going on here under the surface? He felt lost in the night's events, yet at the same time this was exactly where he wanted to be. What could he do but go along with everything? Ashland, that's a lovely name. I'm Merrick, and I'm very pleased to meet you. He felt that to be an inadequate response, but Ashland beamed at him at his answer. Your name isn't very common either. We are of a kind, then. This is pleasing. She practically bubbled over with excitement, then suddenly cocked her head to the side and looked a bit alarmed. Someone's coming, and you don't have all the information you need to make it through this evening safely. Come over here, quickly. She grabbed his arm and pushed him onto a stool in the darkest corner of the kitchen, positioning herself between him and the wall. No matter what, keep your face hidden. Do you understand? If someone speaks to us, let me answer. Pretend to be engrossed in my presence, no matter what. He slipped his arms around her and pressed her. She slipped his arms around her and pressed herself against him. Hide your face in my hair, she whispered, as the kitchen door opened behind her. His head was spinning, dizzy from being so close to her so suddenly. Her scent, her presence, and the suspense of the moment just added to this feeling until he could barely stand it. Her fingers were gently stroking the back of his neck, rather absently, yet soothingly. He could feel her nervousness. Why was she so attuned? What were these people like, anyway? There was some rustling and a low laugh from the figures who had entered. Merrick could only see the curve of Ashland's neck and her voluminous curly hair, which under other circumstances would be more than enough. He realized that her hair was an unusual mix of deep, sparkling black and strands of delicate lavender. How did she manage that? He must have made a sound because Ashland tensed slightly, and one of the others in the room laughed again and said, Oh, look, Ashland caught herself a plaything. Will you share, or are you greedy today, Ashland? Merrick winced at the condescending tone and the remarkably mellifluous voice. How could such a lovely voice become so bitter? A second, more masculine voice chimed in. I don't think I recognize it, Adana. Of course, I can barely see it. Him? Ashland, did you find a boy? What a pleasant surprise! The other one sounded like he was teasing Ashland. He seemed rather more likable. We should leave her to her fun, Adana. I'm sure she will introduce us later when they are less involved. He laughed lightly. Merrick had the impression he was trying to help Ashland, that there was some underlying tension that he was trying to diffuse. Adana seemed to want to start trouble. Ashland turned slightly, cradling his head and keeping him hidden in her hair, and replied in an even tone, I am rather occupied, 'tis true. Adana, does the party grow dull enough to drive you to the kitchen for entertainment? Adana's answer dripped with ice. Ah, those fools! They never tire of the same entertainments, you know. But rumor had it that some dark bird soared boldly through our threshold, and that waked my curiosity. Imagine when I find it roosting here in the shadows with you. There was a rustling of fabric, and then a thin and cold hand had his chin, trying to wrench him from Ashland's protection. Merrick's heart jumped at the touch and started pounding. His impulse was to run away as fast as he could. Ashland laughed merrily and stepped away, although the look she shot to Merrick was full of warning. What you force, you do not command, she told Adana, a poisonous smile on her lips. Audentes fortuna juvat, Adana replied with a sneer, and Merrick's brain suddenly unlocked and he knew what to say next. Bless those useless Latin classes. Lady, he addressed Adana, as you advise, fortune might smile upon my boldness, and this crow does speak for himself, as you will. She looked taken aback at his words, but recovered with an ingratiating smile. Ah, the dark bird has a tongue and some wits as well. What other surprises this night might hold, fledgling? And what say you to your presence here, uninvited and unknown? Merrick gave her his most engaging grin and answered, Your gatherings are legendary, and I could not help but see one myself. I came through a small bit of adversity to get here, but I managed to bring a small peace offering of beverages. Ashland was kind enough to extend her welcome to me, and here I stand now, quite honored to be in your presence. He had a sudden urge to bow, and did so, instinctively knowing that would impress. Adana seemed rather taken aback, a look that seemed alien on her lovely features, but did not reveal her bitter personality. She took a moment to smooth the folds of her burgundy silken gown and to toss back her shining black hair, before she turned to her tall, handsome companion and said, What think you, Cullen? Should we accept or exile this brazen one? Cullen laughed derisively at her and said, It is not ours to decide, Adana, and you know it. He took matters into his own hands when he entered the door, and he made his amends with a gift and a well-spoken explanation. Ashland has befriended him, and there is naught for us to say, nay or yea at this juncture. Do not overreach. He weathered Adana's evil glance with a guffaw and an eye roll as she pushed past him in a huff. Do not think you have exempted yourself from my scrutiny, Raven, she threw to Merrick as a parting shot before huffing out the door. A palpable chill seemed to lift, heightened by Cullen's imminent collapsing with laughter, which he managed to stave off by falling into Ashland. The shocked look that had not left her face the entire time that Merrick had engaged the enemy, so to speak, finally faded into relief. That was an experience I most certainly do not want to repeat again, she gasped. She reached for Merrick's hand and held it tightly. You handled yourself much more eloquently than I would ever have hoped. You are amazing. Merrick's heart leaped in his chest at her declaration. When had he ever been smitten so quickly? She gave him a smile as sweet as honey before turning back to Cullen gratefully. And you, I appreciate you intervening. I know that it is against your normal stance. Cullen said with a rueful look, I have of late grown tired of these games, and I would distance myself from such as she if I could. He turned to Merrick and gave him a slight bow. Well played, sir. I am Cullen, pleased to be of service. Well met, and you are welcome in our poison court, but tread carefully. Merrick considered his words and nodded slowly. I appreciate your advice and assistance. I'm Merrick. I have to say I never dreamed that my little adventure of the evening would go this route, but I'm pleased to meet you on this journey. Cullen threw back his blonde head and laughed at that. Ashland, you found a keeper. Lucky girl. And you found him just today? She laughed. Here in the kitchen. He brought us beer. Good beer. Marks for him, then. Cullen straightened himself out, adjusting the cuffs on his white ruffled shirt. Merrick realized at that moment that Cullen was dressed as quite the dandy, with a red velvet frock coat to go with the ruffled shirt, and neat black pants tucked into the pointed boots. His blonde hair was evenly pulled back into a tidy ponytail with a black ribbon. It made Merrick feel severely underdressed for the party. Even Ashland was wearing a silky black dress that looked made from some historic pattern, all ancient lines and flattering fit. Ashland, love, you should take him out to the party now. I think you've established for him from what cloth we're cut, if you gather my meaning, Cullen said, giving Merrick a measuring look. If he can keep on his toes with Adana, he'll handle the others admirably. Ashland replied, This is probably true, but I'd like to have a few more minutes with him first before entering that mess. If Merrick is amiable, of course. She looked to Merrick, who smiled and replied, Of course. See you out then. Cullen gestured widely at the rest of the house and slipped back into the party. Ashland looked down at the floor and muttered, Well, I certainly screwed that up. My apologies, although you took it all in stride. Forgive me? She looked up into his eyes beseechingly and laid her hands gently on his arms. She looked terribly fragile and sad, and the only answer he could see was to kiss her. Her eyelids fluttered shut as she rose up a bit on her toes to meet him. Their lips met, and his world seemed to shrink to tunnel vision for a moment, a heady feeling, like being drunk, or on a vertigo-inducing carnival ride, took over him. He was practically reeling when she finally broke away and slid her arms around him in a gentle embrace. I think that's more than enough for now, don't you? We cannot have you intoxicated so soon in the evening. Merrick gasped a breath, trying to catch his balance. What just happened? That was amazing. Wow. Ashland gave him a mysterious little grin. I have my secrets to be revealed in time. I have to admit that was an unexpected sweetness. She reached up and touched his face briefly and said, Now I need to impart to you this bit of importance. What you experienced with Adana, that is the rule rather than the exception. There are a few of us here who are of good heart, but some of us are ruled by the bitter hand of ennui and impatience. They like to play games. Words matter here, as I'm sure you've noticed, so mark what you say. Promise nothing that you cannot deliver, and give as little as you can. Weigh everything you utter as carefully as you can, so that you say exactly what you mean. Shades of meaning can get you into much trouble with some of us. Trust your instincts. You seem to possess good sense about how to act around us. We are as quick to bless as to curse, so if you impress, you will do well. I will try to give you signs of who to trust and who to mistrust, but stand by your instincts. And remember, I'm there with you. She stopped and gave him a look of amusement. Is this the sort of adventure you were expecting? Not quite, but I must admit, I don't think I could have dreamed up this scenario, so I'm rather pleased, especially as I've managed to find you by coming here. He smiled, suddenly shy, and squeezed her hand lightly. She laughed delightedly and said, Then let us go and conquer the party, my dear. And that is chapter 1. Hopefully, you will go and get yourself a copy of the book if you don't have it already in your Kindle or on order and paperback. And now I need to drink some water because I am so squeaky. Sorry, I had to keep stopping and repeating things. My voice is definitely cutting out a little bit. Excuse me. So let's see. We still got some time. Would you like to hear some poetry? Do you have other questions? Yeah. Thank you. I do have, one of the things that I do besides write stories is I write poetry. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you. And before I was publishing, well, before I published this, like I've never published any novel before today. I have published poetry and some short stories. Um, and one of the things I do have besides the poetry that I will read is if you were on my mailing list or if you sign up to my mailing list, you can get a short story that is all about the background of Ashland, who I just read about. And thank you guys. Thank you so much. So if you sign up for my mailing list, then you will get that short story, which will tell you a little bit about how Ashland came to be and how she came to be. She is a dreamling. She was born in the dreamland, and how she got here. It's a pretty cool little short story. So you can go to christianeknight.com and sign up for my mailing list if you haven't already. And if you signed up and you don't have it, let me know. It should come to you automatically. So we've got some requests for poetry. Let's see if I can dig some up. I have this tablet all set up for things. So I have things to read. If you came to the Baltimore Fairy Festival, you would have heard these already, but that's okay, because it never hurts to hear them more than once, right? All right, some poetry from me. Lying back in piles of autumn leaves under the wizened oak, you and I could spend September days curled together, whispering thoughts, working our magics in our secret language. We could run through the trees, we could dance in the meadow, singing praises to open skies, chanting our promises to the moon, the sun, the stars. And when we fall to the earth, all our magics flown to the soul of the world, we will gather our darkness around us like a moon and star-stained sheet. And then we will be as one, my friend. Then we will be as one. Opening the gate. Why are you silent in this circle of words? The center of your knowledge embraces the secret stillness. You are going home, and I will follow. I am not afraid. Into the woods, the dark Mickle woods. The center of your knowledge. Leaves like dampened silk unfetter your stillness. Soothe me with your celestial eyes and old gnarled stumps dressed in mossy velvet. I am not afraid. The center of your knowledge is my name inside the green. I lay claim to the key. I embrace the secret stillness with my open mind. I am not afraid. We are going home. I am not afraid. You know, I had some other stuff here, and I don't know where I put it. Oh, here we go. This one is called Oak. Where shall I begin? When the cool air touched my cheek, or when the first of the hot blood fell like rain, pure and glistening into the silver chalice? I remember so much of that day. Too much. The leaves of the great oak rustled, the secret voice of the woods, warning me of the consequences of that cup, yet cautioning me not to let it pass by. Few see this grail, fewer still are offered the choice. Moist earth between my bare toes confirmed the tale, begged for the consecration. I stood on once hallowed ground, now left fallow. The grove ran wild, and that wildness beckoned me and bade me to drink from the font of holiness. What could I do? I drank. I became one with the forest. Perhaps you will see me again, running through the cool green woods, before the hunter strikes me down. Or better still, you shall see me on Midsummer's Eve, under the stars and the moon of the velvet sky, and we shall not speak, not with words. Do not expect me once the snows fall. Only look for a shiny chalice buried in the silvery drifts. And one more. This is called Wild Children of the Forest. We trip a merry path to the river, the bloodline of the forest. To immerse ourselves in our mother's essence is our goal, to reaffirm our ties to the land. We are dancing, singing, skipping as we rush down the steeply sloped banks together. We decide as one to throw off our garments, stripped to our truest selves. Playfully we roll in the muddy riverbank, plait our hair with leaves and twigs, draw swirly dirt tattoos on smooth, unfettered skin. We are adorned in the goddess, with the goddess. We are part of the forest now. Our souls are entwined with the green. Slowly, ceremonially, we file into the waiting river. The cool, calm waters embrace us like a long-lost friend. We scoop water with curved palms, pour it over each other's heads. Some of us swim under the surface, not making a ripple. Others, bolder, splash and cavort. They are unafraid to make a joyous noise to the lady. Carefully we rinse mud from our bodies, free the small braids and debris from our tangled manes, re-civilizing. But even as we dry, don our city clothes, and trudge towards home, the feeling does not flee. We are the wild children of the forest forever. And that's what I have for you today, Mary Beltane. Thank you for all the kind words in the chat. Thank you so much. My hands are sweaty. It's why there are certain words, certain phrases I know I'm going to stumble over when I say, because I have this habit of writing really kind of complex sentences. And I try to space them out, but that one in the Wild Children of the Forest, I always slip over it. So that's why I made that little, because I knew as soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, there it went. Lisa says I have a Facebook connection for me. Oh, bring it on. I would definitely love to meet more people who write fae books. I am actually working on some projects other than the sequel to this book. Robert and I are working on something, and which is really exciting and a little different from this. And I am working on trying to put together a book of poetry. Some of the things that you heard me read here, plus some newer things that I have. I used to, back in the day, I used to do zines. And back in the 90s, it was a big thing. You know, we all would just go and like make our copier zines, and I would do a lot of cut and paste. Even as desktop publishing became a big thing, I still used cut and paste with it because I like that feel, the aesthetic of it. So I had a lot of my poetry published in that, as well as some short stories. And then as I became a zinester, I got connections with other people who were doing poetry and short story zines and had some of my work done there. But I haven't published any of my poetry other than in my website for a long time. So I want to change that. So look for that to come as well. Does anyone have any other questions for me? Any other things you might want to ask me? Let's see what my poll says. My poll says people like paper books over ebooks, and audiobooks got a 10%. And then one reading for chumps. Hey, Lisa, you and I have so much in common. It's so fun. Zines were so great. I mean, like, I still collect them. I mean, like, there are still some out there. But there's something precious about them, you know, because they're smaller and they're portable and they just feel like a little treasure, you know, like people really put their heart and souls into them. And there are actually some places that still do kind of a zine sort of thing. There's Lady Rosebud's Chaplet. I can't remember the name of it now. Oh, this is terrible. I'm going to remember it. It's by Small Beer Press. Once I'm off the air, I'll remember the exact name of it. They still do kind of a zine sort of magazine with short stories and poetry, and it's fantastic. And there are some other places that are doing zines, but one really great place there's a place where you can buy zines. Like, they have a whole huge rack of zines here in Baltimore. It's called Atomic Books. It's in the Hamden neighborhood. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to convince them to carry my book there. But when you go in there, they have this huge rack of zines, and it's fantastic to see. Some of them are still going from the 90s. And then there are other ones, there are new ones popping up every day. There's a publisher called Microcosm Press that still puts out zines from lots of places. When I was doing zines, I used to also sell other people's zines. We would do that for each other. You would buy like 5 or 6 and then kind of like, put them in your little catalog. Everybody had everybody else's zines in the catalog. But I love that kind of energy, where everybody is just sort of inspired by each other. That's the thing I live off for now. I mean, if you know me, which most everybody here I think does, they know that one of the things that I get off of more than anything is that trait of creative energy. We're all just kind of, and it doesn't matter what kind of creative energy. The great thing is you can be sitting in a room with somebody else doing something completely different creatively from you, and you still have that energy sort of bubbling in the air. I love that, and it is one of my places where I get the most done. I have the most breakthroughs. So that whole zine thing, even though it was long distance, had that same kind of feel to it. Let's see. I prefer making physical collages over digital too. Yeah, it's just it looks better, it feels better, and it's fun. I mean, it's so much more fun than doing desktop publishing, which, now it's like, it's digital publishing, whatever. I have all of my originals so I have because when you do cut and paste, your pages are thick, and I'm sure Caitlin knows, your pages get really thick. I have a whole thing that's got all my originals. I should take some out and take some pictures and post them up. They're funny because they look weird when you look at them. I mean, people don't, I guess some younger people may not really even be familiar with what cut and paste looks like when you're doing that kind of publishing. I started off using a typewriter and then cutting out and going to the library and getting art that wasn't copyrighted, was passed outside copyright, and cutting all that out and doing collages and pasting that in. And then I started doing where I would do all of the text on a computer and print that out and cut it out and paste it all and, arrange it. So much fun. It's much easier in a lot of ways to do a book nowadays. You don't have to do that, but it's fun in that kind of visceral sort of getting back to the roots sort of way to do it. So maybe I'll do a zine. Who knows? We don't know. That would be fun, right? Do poetry zine. If you're into that, let me know. Oh, Mimeo. Mimeo's great because you can sniff it. Yeah, the fanzines, that's exactly, the whole zine culture came out of fanzines. If you were big in science fiction and fantasy, that was where, you got a lot of your info before glossy magazines became a thing. It was like fanzines and pulp zines. That was what you had. I like that kind of DIY culture. It just feels, again, more visceral. You're really in it. It's people who really care, because it takes a lot of effort to make something like that. It's not like, it's just, there's so much more that goes into it in some ways. It's super fun. Oh, okay, now we're getting competitive over here in the comment section. So you guys, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate y'all so much for supporting me and for being here through the different steps that I've taken, and also for tolerating all of my constant talk about, my book is coming, my book is coming. Well, it's here, so you're not going to hear about it quite as much. I would appreciate if you know people who would enjoy it as a read, to let them know. And if you were on my advanced reader team and you haven't gotten me a review or done a review on Amazon, that would be super awesome, because those are the things that help me succeed as an author. Just keeping that momentum going. And I don't want to be a giant pain and be like, could you tell somebody? Could you pass this on? But could you tell somebody? Could you pass it on? It really does help. You know, it's the same as in all of our creative aspects. The promotion thing gets to be a drag, but it is really important. And the more people that hear about it, the more chances there are that people will pick it up and get it out there, and that I will be successful and be able to do more of this. Because I really like it, and I have been really thrilled with the response that I've gotten from everybody as they've read my book. I thought a few people would read it and that would be it. You know, this has been an amazing thing for me, because I've been a writer my entire life, but I've not shared all that much of it. And I had people who knew me who were like, you write? And yeah. Funny thing, you know, when I was in a band, I had people that did the same thing. You sing? I sing all the time. I write all the time. People see my writing on Facebook and on my blog posts and all the time, but it doesn't click, you know, that like, oh, you don't just do this, you do this. You know? Yeah. So anyway, thank you all. Doing what the Fae do not do. I'm thanking you very specifically, because without your support and help, I couldn't do this. And y'all are the best team ever. You have been here for me, and I appreciate it so much. Thank you for reading it. Thank you for passing on the info. Thank you for cheering me on when I complained about how it was dragging, and kept me upbeat on the days when it was hard. So Robert says, well-written books gather readers like a snowball rolling down a hill. That's a great visual. I love that. That's what I like to think about. So anyway, if you missed any of this, it will be reposted. It'll be a link so you can watch it again, and I will post it up on my website, christianneknight.com. If you have any other questions that I didn't answer during this little party, I will be happy to answer them in the comments. And again, this will be posted up on my website, so I can also answer questions there. And if you love it, if you buy it and you read it and you love it, leave me a review on Amazon. It really helps. Again, I appreciate y'all so much, and it's about that time to wrap things up. So anybody have any other questions or comments they want to get in before I shut this whole thing down and go eat like 5 of these Ricola cough drops? In fact, actually, while we're here, I'm going to put one in my mouth right now, because I'm classy like that. Never let it be said that I'm classy, because I'm not. I am a girl with a wreath on her head, though, because it's Beltane and book launch day. All right, I don't see any other questions coming in. I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. You are great. And if you're watching this after the fact and you haven't picked up the book, you can go to either christianneknight.com or insleepyouknow.com, and all the info to order is right there. Anywhere you want it, you can get a signed paperback, you can get a paperback from Amazon, you can get an ebook from Amazon or a couple of other sources. It's all there. Thanks so much. I love you all. And now I have to figure out how to turn this off, don't I? Bye, everybody. Bye.